Nanapua o Hawaii Tupa ama hope o ka aina Iki mai ka elele o ka loko I.
Here's an interesting article, and people are going to say, how come you're talking about this religious stuff now? You talk about all kind of stuff, yeah? And this is what Hawaiian Potpourri is. It's a potpourri of different things. Okay, got it? All right. Now, here's a article about this military officer. I'm not picking on the military, as contrary to general opinion that I'm always having something negative to say about the military. Okay, but this one guy, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, he says, I ultimately felt a moral obligation to take action and do all in my power and ability within the confines of Army regulation to try and help those who had no voice. A lieutenant colonel who first saw war in the Persian Gulf in 1991 comes home from his latest combat deployment disillusioned, convinced that American troops are dying for naught. He buries himself in his notes over Christmas, reflecting on what he's seen and where his duty lies. He has a family and a career to think about, but he is seized with a conviction that he must speak out. He writes a lengthy article in a professional journal for military officers, calling out top leaders on what he perceives as their failures. It is the experience of Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, whose, quote, Truth, Lies, and Afghanistan appeared on the Armed Forces Journal's website earlier this month, and who was featured in the New York Times and on CNN and ABC News. It's also the experience of Colonel Paul Yingling, who 5 years ago, as a lieutenant colonel, just home from Iraq, wrote a widely circulated article, A Failure in Generalship, that offered a similarly scathing critique of the military's top leaders. The net effect of each man's article on the Army and its wars in Iraq then and Afghanistan now is hard to assess. But it raises other important issues, how it affected each man's career and what it portends for other line officers who depend on the military for their livelihood, but who believe they are their leaders' failings, or they see their leaders' failings and want to speak up. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole article, but what just from that article does it tell you? It tells you don't be a lieutenant colonel because you're going to end up having this sense that you should be speaking up because you've seen the failures of the general officers, and if you write about it, then they're going to nail you for speaking up. So try to avoid the lieutenant colonelship, period. But then, do you just keep your mouth shut? No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say you have to speak up. So don't wait until you're lieutenant colonel before you speak up. Just speak up. And then the consequences may be contrary to your best professional career, but it certainly will be good for your, your personality development. Okay. The articles that I get sent to me by a listener who calls himself radio and TV surfer, or anonymously yours, sometimes he signs it. So, brother, thank you for sharing your opinion. And he's one of those who don't like to get on the radio, but he will send me articles. This is the article that I intended to read, and it's a humanist's appeal for identity in the Army. Soldiers who don't believe in God can go to war with atheists stamped on their dog tags, but humanists and others with various secular beliefs are still officially invisible in the Army. Major Ray Bradley is applying to be the first humanist recognized as a, quote, distinctive faith group leader by the Army. In the meantime, he can't be designated as a humanist on his official records or dog tags, although he can be classified as an atheist. Is there a difference between an atheist and a humanist? Of course, it's a world of difference, but not to the Army. They're the same. Okay, the distinction may not seem like a large one to those unfamiliar with humanism, but the Fort Bragg's-based officer says it is the equivalent of being told that Christian is not an acceptable designation. Or, I'm sorry, told that Christian is an acceptable designation, but not Catholic. Okay, maybe I don't really understand that differentiation. Are Catholics Christians? I think so. I think so. But are Christians Catholics? Yes and no, depending if you're Catholic or not. But still a Christian. Okay. Humanism is a philosophy that guides a person, Bradley said. It's more than just a stamp of what you're not, which is an atheist. An atheist does not believe that there exists a God, I think. But not being an atheist, I better not say too much. Humanism core belief range from the assertion that knowledge of the world is derived from observation and rational analysis, to the conviction that working to help others also promotes individual happiness. So it's sort of like if you humanists out there would be willing to at least hear my interpretation of it, what Plato said. Plato said you have to save the appearance. Okay? Okay. So you're asking, well, what the heck is that supposed to mean? He says you can develop any theory you like, and you're entitled to your opinions as to theories, but you got to save the appearance. That means that you cannot contradict the theory with the appearance or with the facts or with the observables that are produced either under a microscope or whatever mathematics you come out with. You got to accord the theory to the observable facts. You got to save the appearance. You cannot do all kinds of stuff. It's very similar to what is it called? Global warming. I just heard a person say, and he was right on point. He says, yes, you are entitled to your own opinion. Republicans, you can have your own opinions, but you are not entitled to your own facts. You cannot make up your own facts. You got to save the appearance. And it goes all the way back in, what is that, Greek or Roman? It was Plato Greek or Roman? But it goes all the way back to that period of time where Plato himself had participated in the development of the scientific method. You got to save the appearance. Okay, so I would say that's what the humanist thing is all about. So when you talk about God, you also have to be consistent with what are the observable facts. But anyway, Preacher Polka will refrain from his preacherhood and continue with just reading the article. So the article continues to say, and I am reading the article, it's from Keeping Faith from the Honolulu Star Advertiser, and this was on the 11th of February, okay? The issue is another sign of the growing willingness of military personnel at Fort Bragg and other military bases to publicly identify themselves as atheists, agnostics, humanists, or otherwise without belief in a supernatural higher power. Okay? All right, let's see how long I should continue with this reading. Okay, and seek the same recognition granted to Christians, Jews, and other believers. There are a lot more people with these beliefs than just Major Ray Bradley, but he is in a position where he can stand up and put in a request for this, said Jason Torpy, president of the Military Association of Atheists and Freethinkers and an Army veteran. Imagine the many others who are not majors or who are not lieutenant colonels or who are not officers, but whose feelings are in the same sense that Bradley's is. And yet they cannot say anything to protect the integrity of their beliefs. Okay? Unless you come across one of these, what is that? Local folks or local soldiers from Hawaii with the name Irwin Watara or something like that, only a lieutenant. And he says, hey, I'm not going to to Iraq. No way, bro. I go to Afghanistan. I've been to Afghanistan, but I won't go to Iraq. And they, what is that? Court-martialed him. You know, his only mistake was he's not supposed to have gone to Afghanistan as well. It was a wrong war, according to Preacher Polka. Okay, but anyway, the article that was sent to me, this humanist appeal, it also shows the Dalai Lama standing next to Desmond Tutu and Desmond Tutu's wife, and they're talking about partners in peace. Okay, which brings me to the next topic. But this next one actually comes out of a book written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And his book says something very interesting. It says, Beyond Religion. Do you remember when I read an article written by Desmond Tutu that says God is not Christian? And it raised some really interesting kinds of stuff. He said, how can God be Christian with all this bad stuff that the Christians are saying? So now Dalai Lama writes a book on Beyond Religion. And let's take a brief look at this, what he calls rethinking secularism. Inner values in an age of science. He says, I am a man of religion, but religion alone cannot answer all our problems. Well, that's a very sensible thing to say. Not long ago, I attended a formal ceremony to mark the opening of a new Buddhist temple in Bihar, a particularly densely populated and poor part of northern India. The chief minister of Bihar, an old friend of mine, made a fine speech in which he expressed his conviction that with the blessings of the Buddha, the state of Bihar would now prosper. When my turn came to speak, I suggested half-jokingly that if Bihar's prosperity depended solely on the blessings of the Buddha, it really should have prospered a long time ago. After all, Bihar is home to the holiest site for Buddhists, Bodh Gaya, where the historical Buddha attained full enlightenment. For real changes, we require more than the blessings of the Buddha, powerful though they may be, and more than prayer. We also need action, which will only come about through the able efforts of the chief minister and others like him. Imagine he's saying that, and he's an invited guest to speak at this dedication of his temple. Well, at least you can say he has a sense of humor. Okay, but he goes on. He says, this is not to suggest that blessings and prayers are useless. In fact, I consider prayer to be of immense psychological benefit. Well, interesting how he puts it, yeah? Immense psychological benefit. But we must accept that its tangible results are often hard to see. When it comes to obtaining certain direct results, it is clear that prayer cannot match the achievements of, for instance, modern science. When I was ill some years ago, it was certainly comforting to know that people were praying for me. But it was, I must admit, still more comforting to know that the hospital where I was being treated had the very latest equipment to deal with my condition. Okay. In light of our growing mastery over so many aspects of the physical world in the past 200 years or so, it is not surprising that many people today question whether we have any need for religion at all. Things which in the past were only dreamt about, the elimination of diseases, space travel, computers, have become reality through science. So it is not surprising that many have come to place all their hopes in science, and even to believe that happiness can be achieved by means of what material science can deliver. But while I can understand how science has undermined faith in some aspects of traditional religion, I see no reason why advances in science should have the same effect on the notion of inner or spiritual values. Indeed, the need for inner values is more pressing in this age of science than ever before. In the attempt to make a compelling case for inner values and ethical living, in an age of science, it would be ideal to make that case in wholly scientific terms. Although it is not yet possible to do so purely on the basis of scientific research, I am confident that as time goes on, a more and more secure scientific case for the benefits of inner ethical values will gradually emerge. I'm going to stop there because now he's going to deviate into another area. But I wanted to share that with you. Rethinking Secularism is the first chapter that I read from, and it's a book from the Dalai Lama, Beyond Religion. And you might want to get a copy of it. I don't know who sent it to me. It's not a book that normally I would pick up and and part money with, but now having read the introduction, I would, I guess. Okay, why do I present that issue to you? Because I think he is talking about, in essence, the same issues that we tried to address back about 1988 or 89. I was doing some work in the international arena, and at that time, I gave and what we call an intervention to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. And at that time, what they were talking about was science, technology, and human rights. And I remember an ethicist who was a nuclear biologist or something like that. But her specialty area was developing ethical principles and the study of ethical principles as it moves along with science and technology. And I would travel with my small, computer, because I was doing my second glance programs, my interviews, and as I would travel in different parts of the world, I would interview people. But the one note that she said was that science and technology is moving ahead so quickly that the ethical codes are not keeping up with it. And that's going to be dangerous until we develop greater ethical principles to accord with these scientific developments. So that was very curious. And yet when I talk with some others like Baha'i Faith, was that the Baha'i Faith? And others, they would say, no, we already developed the ethical development found in, and then they recite their particular religion. And yet we see how the world is going haywire with this very Christian nation in possession of a nuclear weapon. And it's like, who was that? Was it Plato again who said that a man carrying a hammer is looking out for a nail to hit on its head? Okay, anyway, my thought just went to another issue where I was arrested for hitting a person on the head with a hammer. But we won't get into that. Sticking with the subject, you have a nuclear weapon. So what do you do with it? You test it. You try it out, and they did. They didn't keep up. The ethical standards was not up to standard with development of science. Okay, getting back to, and I will get back to that earlier discussion. I will tell you about the presentation I made and how I tried to develop this question of science, technology, and in that case, not religion, but human rights, which in essence is the same development as the development of religion. So, I've been asked to give an intervention at the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. And so I sit there at the podium, and everyone is very quiet, listening to what I have to say. And what do I say? Okay, this is it. If I can remember as accurately as I did at that time. And this was back in about 1988. I said, imagine two dots on an endless sheet of paper. Immediately, the question comes to mind, well, how do you connect these two dots? And immediately, the answer for many of us is a straight line. You know, basic geometry tells you that a straight line is the most efficient, most effective way of moving from one dot to another dot. We all learned that, or most of us did. Okay. So that's it, a straight line. Somebody else comes in and says, well, can I have an opinion on this? Oh, of course you can. He says, well, if you believe that everything eventually returns back to its point of origin, then really a straight line is not the best way of connecting your dots. A curved line would be actually better, because the curved line does not waste the energy and time of a straight line having to stop, reversing direction, and then going all the way back. So a curved line simply curves right around to get back to its point of origin. So from the culture that I come from and from the belief system that we work with, curved lines are better than straight lines. They're more efficient, more effective. If you move that discussion into, let's say, the martial arts, the soft style would say, of course, curved lines are much better. The hard style would say, no, straight line. Yeah? Okay, so you have a difference of opinion. Now, somebody else comes up and says, well, would you be willing to hear yet another opinion? And this person says, you know, it's not my intent of returning back to the dot that I started from, nor is it my intent to stick to that sheet of paper or to reach that second dot so quickly. What I'd like to really do is explore the spaces in between. When I travel, I like to smell the flowers. I like to take roads untraveled before. I'd like to go visiting wherever I want to go before I reach my destination. And that really is a better way of moving from dot to dot. So that is my way of moving. Okay. So normally we ask, oh, okay, we got three different ways. And maybe if, as we see other people smiling and wanting to come to the microphone, there may be more. So the question then becomes now, not how do we draw our line from dot to dot, but what is the better way or the best way of doing it? And then someone else comes up and says, well, you know, maybe that question itself is not the appropriate question. Maybe there is no best way of drawing your line from one dot to another dot. But if you are really talking about human rights within science and technology, perhaps it is best just to allow each person to draw his line or to make his travels in whatever way he or she chooses to do so. And that is the essence of human rights within a broader concept of science and technology. You cannot require that each person conforms to one or another method when they are following what some people would say different drummers or different religions or different ethics or whatever it is. So it was a very short presentation, and that would be my commentary to essentially what the Dalai Lama had been talking about, although he places it in terms of religion and science, and of course I added technology, that what we need to do is be softer in our approach and ask ourselves what the right question should be, if there is in fact a right question, but trying to be more conscious of the multiplicity of thoughts with regards to a simple matter of connecting two dots.
Ko palana nā pua o Hawaii Tūpa'a mahope o ka aina Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino Pala pala anunu me ka paka Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave Koku ana honoa o Pi'ilani Ka ko'o mai kaua i o mano Pa'apu me ke oni o ka kuhi hewa Aolea e kau i ka pulima Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi Po o hui ai nā ku ai hewa I ka pono sivila a o ke kanā